We often imagine courage as the decisive factor in war. You grit your teeth harder, you charge further, you refuse to yield, and somehow that makes the difference. But there are battles where courage is so abundant on both sides that it stops being the variable. Then other things decide who lives and who dies. It's 23 February 1945, Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima. A concrete bunker clings to the volcanic rock like a barnacle. Inside, Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto crouches under a low ceiling, his rifle leaning against the wall, his hands shaking as he writes by the dim glow of a shielded lamp. The words on the page, if discovered, could earn him a bullet from his own officers. The Marines are not human, he writes. They do not die like other men. Everything we were told about American weakness was a lie. Through the narrow firing slit, sulphurous smoke drifts over black sand. A few minutes ago, he watched 6 Marines charge a neighboring position under a net of machine gun fire. 3 fell almost immediately. The other 3 kept coming. When his comrades answered with a barrage of grenades, one Marine threw himself over a blast to shield his squad, then kept fighting with wounds so catastrophic Yamamoto struggles even now to describe them. The position fell in minutes. Yamamoto stares at the page. He was taught that Americans, especially Marine, are soft products of a decadent democracy. He was promised they would break under pressure. Right now, in this bunker on Suribachi, every lesson from his training school feels like a lie. Outside 21-0, Japanese defenders are strung through 18 kilometers of tunnels and fortifications across this island. They have been told they will face weak Americans. Instead, in just 36 days, 0 Marines will become casualties here. For soldiers like Yamamoto, the collapse of confidence begins not in Tokyo, not in staff conferences, but right here in the savage logic of close-quarters combat where bodies and blood replace theory, and for many of them, that collapse started long before Iwo Jima. It is August 1942 on a different island. Guadalcanal in the Solomon Chain. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, a veteran of the China campaign where Japanese divisions swept cities aside, scribbles in his diary after the first week of fighting. The Americans who landed are different from any enemy we have faced, he writes. They do not retreat when surrounded. They do not surrender when their position becomes hopeless. Most disturbing, they fight at night as if darkness gives them strength rather than fear. Guadalcanal is Japan's first major defensive battle in the Pacific. The Imperial Japanese Army expects to throw a small, inexperienced American force back into the sea. The 1st Marine Division that comes ashore is just over 10 men. Japanese military intelligence has labeled Marines as elite, yes, but still Americans, products of a soft, individualistic society. Within days, every part of that picture begins to crack. On the night of 20 August, Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome leads a reinforced company in a textbook bayonet assault to recapture Henderson Field. 200 men, they have beaten Chinese formations 3 times their size. Doctrine and experience says night attacks are Japan's domain. Americans fear darkness. Fukudome's column slips through the jungle, confident, but the Marines are not huddled in panic around lanterns. They are waiting, dug into carefully prepared positions, machine guns sighted in interlocking fields of fire. Fukudome's company walks into a killing ground, then something happens he has never seen. Rather than sit and endure, the Marines counterattack into the night. Automatic weapons stab through the trees with disciplined bursts. Marine squads move aggressively through jungle terrain Japanese officers have long considered impenetrable. They kill quietly. They vanish. By dawn, about 90 men remain of Fukudome's 200. His diary, recovered from his body 3 days later, struggles to capture the shock. They attacked us in the night, he writes. We are the ones who attack at night. They moved through jungle we considered impassable. They killed in silence, then vanished. American losses that night, 12 casualties. The pattern repeats across the island. Japanese units, used to enemies who crumble under banzai charges, find Marines who hold until they are physically overrun and fight hand-to-hand with bayonets, knives, entrenching tools, bare fists. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto survives 4 months on Guadalcanal before evacuation. In a letter intercepted by American intelligence, he writes, "We were taught the Americans are individualistic, that they will not sacrifice for their comrades. This is false. I watched a Marine Machine gunner continue firing with both legs shattered until Japanese infantry killed him at arm's length. His assistant immediately took the weapon and continued firing. We lost 40 men to that position. Back in Japan, men like Yamamoto first hear about Marines in intelligence briefings in 1943. An instructor, a staff officer who has interrogated captured Marine seems genuinely unsettled. He tells the class the American Marines undergo training that would be considered criminal abuse in any civilized army. They are broken down mentally and physically, then rebuilt into something that barely resembles the soft civilians who entered. They are taught to view death in combat as honorable, to never surrender, to fight until physically incapable. The comparisons are obvious to every Japanese recruit in the room. This sounds familiar, the officer admits. Yes, they have copied our Bushido, but they have added something we did not anticipate: American industrial capacity. Bushido code of the warrior has been drilled into generations of Japanese soldiers. Death before dishonor, no surrender. But those soldiers increasingly go into battle with rifles and light machine guns against Marines landing with heavy artillery, tanks, flamethrowers, naval gunfire, and aircraft overhead. Marines endure training nearly as harsh as anything in the Imperial Army, becoming fighters just as willing to die. Then they arrive with enough firepower to make defensive positions calculable, not mystical. You don't pray a bunker holds. You calculate how long it takes 105mm shells, Shermans, and naval 5-inch guns to crack it. On 20 November 1943, that equation plays out on a strip of coral sand, Tarawa Atoll. Rear Admiral Kiji Shibasaki commands about 500 defenders on Bushido. His engineers have studded the island with bunkers and sea walls. He famously boasts that 1,000,000 men could not take Tarawa in 100 years. The tuned Marine Division proves him wrong in 7 to 6 hours. Private First Class Tadashi Agawa is one of only 17 Japanese survivors. In interrogation, he describes what he saw. The first wave was massacred in the water, he says. We killed hundreds. More craft arrived. The second wave died on the beach. More came. The third wave reached our positions with flamethrowers. They did not stop until we were dead, or they were. The math is merciless. Almost 400 men die on Tarawa in 3 days. For the Marines, the butcher's bill will echo for generations. For Japanese observers, another lesson is sharper. The survivors of Toon Marine Division have shown that they will take an objective regardless of cost. Captured documents on Saipan in 1944 include sober Japanese intelligence reports classifying Marines as shock troops displaying fanatical devotion to objectives. Marines refuse orders to retreat and will counterattack even when tactically disadvantaged. Casualties inflicted on Marines do not degrade unit effectiveness until the unit is completely destroyed. That conclusion is not based on rumor. It comes from systematic study. Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, a Guadalcanal veteran, lays out the comparison in one report. American Army infantry tactics are sound and conventional. He writes, the Marines operate differently. They advance aggressively regardless of casualties. They accept casualty rates that would cause any rational commander to halt. This is unprecedented. On Peleliu in September 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa designs a defense based on his reading of earlier American landings. He expects a pause. He expects the enemy to consolidate on the beach. He is wrong. The Marines land at 830 on 15 September and by nightfall already control half the airfield. Nakagawa's diary notes his shock. My defensive plan collapsed. Because it assumed the enemy would act rationally, the Marines do not act rationally. They act with total commitment regardless of circumstances. To Japanese observers, this irrationality often looks suicidal. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, later captured on Bougainville, watches a Marine platoon assault a fortified hilltop. The approach is across open ground, swept by machine guns from 3 bunkers. Japanese doctrine would call for heavy artillery preparation, smoke, careful infantry advance. The Marine lieutenant studies the problem for perhaps 30 seconds. Then he orders the techno preparatory barrage. The platoon charges. 7 men fall in the first 20 seconds. The survivors reach the nearest bunker and destroy it with grenades and demolition charges. 3 more fall, taking the second bunker. The last 5 standing clear the third. 12 casualties from 37 men to crack a position Matsumoto's manuals call impregnable. The whole engagement lasts about 4 minutes. This was not courage, he writes later. This was systematic application of acceptable casualties to achieve objectives faster than we could respond. That phrase, acceptable casualties, sits like a stone in the stomachs of Japanese officers. They are trained to value their soldiers' lives within the frame of achieving the objective, but they do not think like this. Marines appear to calculate losses as a line item in an operation order, then pay the bill without flinching if the objective warrants it. That mindset shapes tactics and strategy. If you know the enemy will accept 50% casualties to take your bunker, your choices become impossible. Defend it lightly and lose it quickly. Defend it heavily and strip strength from somewhere else. Abandon it and surrender ground. Every option leads to the same end. Only the timing changes. Major Yoshi Takahari, a senior staff officer on Iwo Jima who survives the battle, articulates this dilemma in post-war interrogation. General Kuribayashi understood that we could not stop the Marines. He explains, our defenses were designed to delay them and inflict maximum casualties. We succeeded brilliantly at inflicting casualties. Over 20 Marines were killed or wounded in 36 days. This would have destroyed any other military force's ability to continue offensive operations. The Marines reinforced and continued attacking without any reduction in intensity. We calculated that inflicting 10 casualties would halt their advance for at least a week. They suffered 10 casualties in the first week, and their advance never slowed. This revealed the fundamental imbalance. They could replace casualties faster than we could. They had 50 Marine divisions in the Pacific Theater or training in the United States. We had finite defenders on each island. Mathematics dictated our defeat, that math goes beyond bodies. It includes beans and bullets. Second Lieutenant Toshio Yamamoto, relation to Tadashi Saipan, leads a patrol 3 days after the Americans land. He expects what any Japanese officer would. Exhausted men, running low on food and ammunition, dug into improvised positions. Instead, he finds something else entirely. Marines were eating hot food, he says later in captivity. They were receiving ammunition resupply by truck. Medical tents treated the wounded. Rest areas allowed units to rotate off the line. Their supply dumps contained more ammunition than my entire regiment possessed. They had mobile kitchens preparing fresh meals. They had portable showers and laundry. They were fighting the most intense battle of the Pacific War and living better than we did in garrison. To him and to others, this demonstrates something more terrifying than any frontal assault. Defeating them was impossible, he says. They would never run out of food, ammunition, medicine, or replacements. We would. Relentless American logistics turn every island battle into a form of attrition that favors the Marines even when their casualty figures look horrific. Japanese defenders fight from fixed positions with limited stocks and no reinforcement. Every casualty is permanent. Every expended round is gone forever. Marines fight from an expanding beachhead with supplies pouring in daily by ship and air. Casualties are flown or ferried out and replaced. Ammunition seems unlimited. The longer a battle lasts, the weaker the Japanese garrison becomes, while Marine units, even bloodied, draw strength from the logistical tail behind them. On Peleliu, Nakagawa's defense drags from 15 September to 27 November 1944. The 1st Marine Division suffers such heavy losses that it is pulled out and replaced by elements of the 1st Infantry Division in October. A tuned Marine Division continues operating alongside the Army until relieved. The battle the Japanese staff originally expect to last about a week grinds on for 11. Japanese defenders inflict over 10 American casualties. America can pay those costs and keep moving. Japan cannot defend every island at that price. The arithmetic is unsustainable. By mid-1944, that unsustainability filters even into Japanese paperwork. Intelligence summaries sent to island garrisons admit plainly, Marines cannot be stopped, only delayed. One captured document from Tinian offers guidance that reads like a quiet obituary for any hope of victory when defending against Marine assault. It states, do not expect to hold positions indefinitely. The objective is to delay the American advance sufficiently to enable other strategic objectives. Each day of resistance is valuable. Each Marine killed or wounded is valuable, but understand that the position will fall. Prepare accordingly. Stock positions with maximum ammunition. Create redundant defensive positions. Plan to fall back in stages. Accept that you will likely die in the defense. Your sacrifice buys time for the Empire. There is honor in this sacrifice, even without victory. This is doctrine designed not for winning, but for bleeding the enemy and dying slowly. It is into that grim logic that men like Tadashi Yamamoto are shipped. By the time transports disgorge them onto Iwo Jima in early 1945, every Japanese defender on the island knows what they are up against. They have heard from survivors of Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu. They know that when the Marines land, they will not stop. They know they will die. They know the island will fall. The only open question, as their commander present it, is how many Marines will die with them. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, who will orchestrate the defense of Iwo Jima, accepts these realities with a clarity most Tokyo politicians never reach. His orders to the garrison read like an unspoken admission that propaganda has lied. We cannot win this battle, he tells his officers. We can only make the Americans bleed for every meter of ground. That is our mission. Accept death, inflict casualties, delay their advance. This is how we serve the Empire in its darkest hour. On February 19, day on Kuribayashi's theories face the test he has prepared them for. 3 Marine divisions, about 70 men, go ashore. His defenses work exactly as designed. Naval bombardment barely scratches the volcanic fortifications. Marines land in neat waves and immediately take catastrophic fire within minutes. Black sand is littered with dead and wounded men sinking under the weight of their own packs in the loose ash. Japanese artillery observers call in perfectly timed salvos. For a moment, the assault truly does look like it might fail. Then something happens that, in truth, Kuribayashi could have predicted from every battle since Guadalcanal. The Marines do not pull back to regroup. They move forward into the artillery fire. They feel for the seams in the defense and slide into them. When bunkers stop and advance, demolition teams crawl forward under fire to blast them apart. When those teams are killed, others take their places. The attack never truly stops. In his bunker on Suribachi, Yamamoto watches a flamethrower team advance on a neighboring pillbox. The first operator approaches. He writes that night, "We kill him." His assistant picks up the weapon and continues, "We kill him." A third Marine takes the weapon. "We wound him severely." He continues firing until the weapon is empty. Then he throws grenades into our firing ports until we kill him. By then, demolition engineers have reached our entrance. The position is lost. This happened 30 times in the first hour. How do you defeat men who will not stop? For him, and for others, the answer is simple and horrifying. You don't. On Iwo Jima, the brutal arithmetic of Marine doctrine is on full display. Roughly 70 Marines land. About 26 become casualties, including nearly 7 killed. Every one of the 21 Japanese defenders dies, except for about 1. 6 men taken prisoner, most of them unconscious or too badly wounded to resist. The Marines pay an almost unimaginable price, but they take every objective. Kuribayashi survives into late March. Before they end, he drafts a final assessment smuggled out by radio to Tokyo. "The Marines are the most effective fighting force I have encountered," he writes. They possess several attributes that make them uniquely dangerous. First, their training creates soldiers willing to accept casualties that would break other units. Second, their firepower exceeds ours by a factor of 5, 1 in artillery and 1 in air support. Third, their junior leaders make decisions at squad level that our officers make at company level, allowing them to exploit opportunities faster than we can react. Fourth, and most critical, they never stop attacking. There is no defense that can survive this combination indefinitely. Outside his command cave on the slopes of Suribachi, men like Yamamoto are learning those same lessons one bunker at a time. Before Kuribayashi ever sits down in his cave on Iwo Jima and writes that final assessment, the pattern he is trying to solve has already been drawn in blood on other islands. Long before Suribachi, small groups of Marines show Japanese commanders what they can do when turned loose in the dark. August 1940, Guadalcanal again. Colonel Kainao Ichiki brings about 900 men of his detachment to the Tenaru, often called Tenaru River, furious that anyone has dared land on what Tokyo considers Japanese soil. His force has crushed Chinese units with aggressive night attacks. Doctrine says Americans are afraid of the dark. He will prove it correct. At about 130 on 21 August, his men wade into the river, bayonets fixed, voices rising into a band's "I cry." Across the water, Marines from the 1st Marine Raider Battalion and 1st Battalion, tuned Marines lie waiting in carefully sighted positions. At point-blank range, machine guns and rifles open up. Pre-registered artillery shells fall like a curtain. The battle lasts maybe 20 minutes. By dawn, more than 700 of Ichiki's 900 are dead in front of the Marine wire. American losses, 35. Word of what those raiders did spreads fast on both sides. The raiders themselves will be disbanded and folded into regular Marine divisions in 1944, but their methods don't disappear. They seep into the Corps as a whole. By late 1943, standard Marine infantry uses techniques raiders pioneered. Night patrols probe constantly. Small units maneuver independently. Radio nets link squad leaders to mortars and artillery in ways Japanese platoon leaders can hardly imagine. The result is an enemy who fights with full intensity 24 hours a day. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who fights on 3 islands before being wounded and captured on Okinawa, tries to explain this later. The Marines never stopped, he says. Day attacks with overwhelming firepower, night attacks by small units infiltrating our positions, constant artillery harassment that prevented rest, air attacks throughout daylight. We were under pressure continuously from landing to defeat. Traditionally, we control the night and could rest and regroup after daylight battles. Against the Marines, there was no rest, there was no safe time, there was only continuous combat until we were dead or captured. This was industrial warfare applied without mercy. The industrial aspect is what fascinates and terrifies Japanese military analysts. They fight with spirit and individual sacrifice to compensate for shortages. Marines fight with maximum force methodically as if solving engineering problems. When they face a bunker, they don't look for an honorable duel. They look for the right tools. On Saipan in June 1944, Second Lieutenant Saber End, an artillery forward observer, watches the landing from concealed positions. His diary, later captured, reads like a step-by-step manual of his own undoing. Warships fire continuously for 3 hours before the first landing craft touch the beach, he notes. Aircraft bomb our positions for 2 hours. When the Marines come ashore, every movement is supported by tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, and air strikes. They advance slowly and carefully, destroying everything in their path. When we stop them at prepared positions, they call in battleship fire that literally erases hills from the landscape. They do not try to overcome our positions through courage or clever tactics. They use overwhelming force to eliminate the positions, then advance. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is industrial destruction applied systematically until resistance becomes impossible. We fight with rifles and light machine guns. They fight with an entire industrial nation's resources. End's words capture what other Japanese soldiers begin to see clearly by late 1944. The Pacific War is not, at root, a test of who has the purest warrior spirit. It is a contest between Japan's limited industrial base and America's overwhelming production. Marines are the cutting edge of that production. Warriors trained to use American advantages ruthlessly, while accepting losses in a way that turns superior numbers and replacements into hard math. Against that mix, Japanese courage and tactical skill lose leverage. The outcome is less a question of if than how long and how much blood. On Iwo Jima, Kuribayashi tries to make that blood count. He bans the massed bands, charges that have wasted lives on previous islands. Instead, he builds a defense in depth. He orders 11 miles of tunnels connecting roughly 500 cave positions. He has every likely approach to key strongpoints pre-registered for mortar and artillery. Every stretch of the beach is marked on firing tables. Every ravine and draw can be swept from multiple angles. 3 Marine Division, about 70 men will, he knows, have to cross those marked spaces under his guns. On February 19, they come. Naval bombardment, hampered by poor observation and the nature of volcanic rock, does less damage than on earlier islands. Japanese artillery and mortars survive. Marine Altis and Higgins boats nose in toward beaches of fine, black ash. As ramps drop, men sink to their shins and knees, trying to run uphill through sand that behaves like ball bearings. Japanese guns open up. Within minutes, the landing zones are carpeted with dead and wounded. From pre-registered positions and hidden cave mouths, Kuribayashi's observers call in perfect concentrations. For a while it looks exactly as he predicted. The beaches are death traps. Then, on positions all along that shoreline, something he has seen in reports, but now watches with his own eyes happens. The Marines do not fall back to reorganize. They push into the fire, they work laterally, looking for seams between strong points. When they hit wire they can't cut under fire, they call in tanks. When tanks can't get through, they call in destroyers and battleships. Where everything stalls, small teams crawl forward on their bellies with satchel charges and flamethrowers. They die, others take their places, the pattern repeats, the line moves. Up on Suribachi, Yamamoto counts the patterns in the fog of cordite and smoke. A flamethrower team approaches the bunker to our right. He writes, "We kill the operator." His assistant picks up the weapon and continues. We kill him. A third Marine takes the weapon. We wound him severely. He continues firing until the tank is empty, then throws grenades into the firing ports until we kill him. By then, demolition engineers have reached the bunker entrance. The position is lost. This happened 30 times in the first hour. How do you defeat men who will not stop? You don't is the quiet answer that settles on men like him. You only choose how long it takes. By the time the flag goes up on Suribachi and the last organized pockets of resistance are crushed on the north end of the island, the numbers look like this. About 21-0 Japanese defenders dead. Roughly 6 men taken prisoner, mostly because they are too wounded or unconscious to resist. Roughly 26-0 Marine casualties out of 70, 0 committed nearly 40%. Any other force might need months to recover. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions are refitting and preparing for future operations within about 6 weeks. For Japanese staff officers watching, that ability to absorb casualties and regenerate becomes the most terrifying characteristic of all. Corporal Kenji Matsumoto, speaking from a prison camp in Hawaii in 1946, puts words to what so many felt on the other side of the barrel. The worst part was knowing they would never stop. He says, "You could kill half a Marine unit and the survivors would continue attacking. You could wound their leaders and sergeants would take command. You could fight them to exhaustion and they would attack again the next day. There was no way to win. You could only kill them until they killed you. That is not war. That is mutual annihilation." And the Marines had more men than we did. Japanese intelligence reports from late 1940. 4 stare at the regeneration problem and blink. They note with no small awe that Marine divisions which suffered 75% casualties on Peleliu in September 1944 returned to full strength within 3 months. New Marines from the States step into shattered units and fight on Iwo Jima with the same effectiveness as veterans. The Imperial Japanese Army has no comparable pipeline, no replacement system that can maintain unit quality under that level of loss. They cannot trade bodies at that rate. American efficiency extends to everything around the rifleman. Wounded Marines receive first aid within minutes. Corpsmen drag them to aid stations. Casualty evacuation by LT, jeep, vehicle, or aircraft moves them to hospital ships in hours. Blood plasma, penicillin, surgical team survival rates for grave wounds climb into ranges no Japanese medic can imagine. Japanese wounded often die from infection, blood loss, lack of supplies. Captures watch Marines with injuries that would have been death sentences in their own units get patched up and sometimes return. The humiliation is double. Not only can the enemy afford more casualties, they waste fewer of them. When the shooting finally stops in August 1945 and Marines land in Japan as occupiers, many expect a population indoctrinated to fight to the death. What they find instead are exhausted citizens and ex-soldiers who have run out of food, medicine, and illusions. Private First Class Teishi Yoshida, repatriated in 1946 after recovering from Saipan wounds, describes the cognitive whiplash. "Everything we were told was lies," he says. "The Marines did not torture prisoners. They provided food, medical care, shelter. They treated us better than our own officers had. The Americans were not barbarians. We were the barbarians. This knowledge destroyed what remained of our faith in the empire. Post-war interrogation reports from thousands of former Japanese soldiers hit similar notes. They contain deep respect for Marine fighting qualities, bitter anger at Japanese leaders who lied about American capabilities, a grim recognition that the war was unwinnable from the start because Japan could not match either American industrial capacity or the fighting quality of units like the Marines. Some of the most comprehensive Japanese analysis of the Marines comes not from think tanks, but from battlefields on Tinian in 1940 or use. Forces capture a thick intelligence report on defending against Marine assaults. Its tone is clinical. First, it states, Marines are on average physically larger and stronger than Japanese soldiers due to better childhood nutrition. Second, they receive more ammunition, better weapons, and more reliable equipment. Third, Marine training emphasizes marksmanship to a degree Japanese forces do not match. The average Marine rifleman, it says, can hit targets at ranges where our soldiers cannot. Fourth, Marines operate with air and naval support we cannot match or counter. Fifth, and most critical, Marines are trained to believe surrender is unacceptable. They will fight to death or victory. There is no third option. The practical guidance that follows reads like a confession. When facing Marines, it warns, do not expect them to retreat. Do not assume casualties will degrade their morale. Do not believe superiority in numbers provides an advantage, as their firepower negates numerical superiority. Do not attempt bans, charges unless no other option exists, as Marines will slaughter charging troops with automatic weapons and artillery. Do not expect them to fear nighttime attacks as they fight effectively in darkness. The only effective defense is prepared positions protected by interlocking fields of fire with multiple fallback positions prepared in advance with the understanding that the position will eventually fall. The goal is not to stop the Marines, but to exact maximum casualties before the position is overrun. It acknowledges reality. It offers no path to victory. To understand why the Marines fight this way, Japanese officers interrogate every prisoner they can. On Saipan, one such report transcribes the words of a captured young Marine when asked about his basic training. Boot camp lasts 8 weeks, he says. For the first 4, drill instructors destroy everything civilian in the recruit. They tell you you're worthless, that you'll never be a Marine, that you should quit and join the army. You're pushed until you think you can't continue, then pushed further. Those who quit are publicly shamed. Those who remain learn that surrender is not an option. The Japanese interviewer notes with some surprise that this resembles their own harsh training. Similar to our methods, but more systematic, he writes in the margin. Then the Marine describes the second half of training. For the next 4 weeks, they build you into a Marine. You learn you're part of something greater than yourself. That every Marine who ever lived is your brother. That part has no direct parallel in Japanese military culture. Bushido extols loyalty to the emperor and unit, but the idea of a transhistorical brotherhood, every Marine who ever lived, creates a different kind of binding. To fail, the prisoner explains, is to betray every Marine who ever lived. For Japanese analysts, the implications are chilling. They are not facing mere conscripts. They are facing men whose personal identity is welded to the fate of their unit and corps. If that unit must pay 50% casualties to take a ridge, that is not just acceptable, it is expected. The difference plays out in battles where Japanese commanders expect old formulas to work. On Saipan, 5 October 1940, 4 by Japanese accounts, Colonel Takeya Takeshita leads about 30 men in a final bands, I charge. Doctrine says such a massed assault, carried out with absolute commitment, will smash any defense. Marine positions in the path of the charge, from the 27th Infantry Division, are mostly asleep at 300 when the screaming column hits. Forward holes are overrun, some guns are taken, but instead of a fighting withdrawal to reform, Marines rally among themselves. Officers and sergeants pull together mixed groups, artillery is dragged up and fired at point-blank range. Trench knives, bayonets, pistol butts of earthing comes into play. By dawn, Japanese bodies carpet an area about 500 meters deep. American casualties, 90 killed, 240, 7 wounded, Japanese dead, roughly 30. Private First Class Teishi Yoshida survives with severe wound. His interrogation report from 3 days later reads, "We were told Americans fear close combat, that they rely on firepower because they are cowards at heart. We charged into their position, expecting them to break. They fought us hand-to-hand and defeated us. I saw a Marine sergeant kill 7 men with a bayonet and a pistol before he fell." This is not cowardice. We were lied to. Those lies extend to every dimension of Marine capability. Propaganda has painted Americans as soft consumers who cannot endure hardship. On Guadalcanal. By September 1942, Matsumoto and his comrades are on reduced rice rations twice a day, and sometimes less. They supplement their food with anything edible they can find in the jungle. They watch Marines eat 3 full meals, receive regular resupply by air and sea, drink fresh water, treat wounds with proper bandages and medicine. We realized we were fighting an enemy who would never run out of resources, Matsumoto says. That understanding broke something in us. And then there are the flamethrowers. Japanese soldiers are trained to accept death by bullet, bayonet, or shell. And Noble fires different. On Okinawa, with burns over 40% of his body, Hideo Takahashi tries to articulate why. "We were taught to accept death in battle as glorious," he says. "Death by bullets, bayonets, artillerists, our warriors' deaths. Fire is something different. You watch flames approach your position. You smell comrades burning alive. You hear the screaming. There is no glory in this death. It is industrial slaughter." This is what the Marines understood that we did not. Modern war has no place for glory. It is about killing the enemy as efficiently as possible using the best tools available. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukuho's earlier diary from Guadalcanal is captured. After he is killed, it offers the most concise technical summary. "The Marines do not fight like individual soldiers," he writes. "They fight like parts of a single machine. Riflemen fix our position. Machine gunners suppress our fire. Mortars deliver smoke to blind our observers. Artillery destroys our bunkers. Tanks advance with infantry following. Aircraft bomb any position artillery cannot reach. This happens within minutes of contact, coordinated by junior officers using radios we do not possess. We cannot counter this because we cannot coordinate at the same speed. By the time our commander understands the situation and issues orders, the Marines have already moved to exploit our weakness. That speed of execution is enabled by something Japanese doctrine discourages: decentralized authority. In Marine units, sergeants make decisions Japanese manuals reserve for captains. Corporals lead assaults Japanese orders would assign to lieutenants. So when a bunker stops a platoon's advance, a squad leader does wait for headquarters. He shifts his fire team, calls for smoke, or 60mm mortar, signals a tanker decides to crawl around the flank on his own initiative. By the time a Japanese battalion commander hears that his forward pillbox is under attack, Marines may already be pouring through a gap he hasn't admitted exists. Late in the war, Japanese intelligence documents adopt a tone that borders on superstition when describing Marines. They are larger, stronger, armed with better weapons, backed by ships and planes that appear in the sky or on the horizon whenever a flare goes up. They soak up casualties and keep coming. They sleep in flooded foxholes, fight in 100-degree heat and 80% humidity, and seem to grow more dangerous as conditions worsen. By early 1945, Kuribayashi sums up all of this in a private letter to his wife. Written in January from Iwo Jima, "I am asked to defend Iwo Jima against American Marines," he writes. "This is a mathematical problem with only one solution. The Marines will land with 70 men. They will have complete control of sea and air. They will bring unlimited ammunition and supplies. They will attack until Iwo Jima falls. My mission is not to defeat them. That is impossible. My mission is to make them pay such a terrible price that the Americans will reconsider invading the home islands. Every day I keep them fighting is a day the Empire has to prepare. Every Marine killed is one less enemy in the final battle. His strategy reflects the shift from confident offense to desperate attrition. But it also rests on a misreading of Marine culture and of American politics. He assumes that sufficiently high casualties will crack American resolve. Instead, on the ground, those casualties harden Marine determination. Every dead Marine becomes a debt. Every day of brutal combat reinforces the survivors' resolve not to let the sacrifice be wasted. The worse it gets, the more fiercely they fight. That feedback loop is foreign to Japanese officers, accustomed to seeing even fanatical troops reach a breaking point. On Io, defenders watch something they have not seen before. Marine units take 40% casualties and keep their standards. Platoons shrink to squads. Squads shrink to fire teams, but those fire teams still move, communicate, and coordinate with tanks and guns. On 10 March 1945, 3 weeks into the battle, Tadashi Yamamoto scratches out his last diary entry in his Suribachi bunker. Tomorrow the Marines will reach this position, he writes. We have killed hundreds of them in the past 3 weeks. More arrive every day. They do not weaken, they do not slow down, they do not stop. I thought our spirit was stronger than American materialism. I was wrong. The Marines have both spirit and material. They have courage equal to ours, combined with weapons and supplies we cannot match. They are what we claim to be. We are what we claimed they were. This is the truth we die knowing. The next morning, Marine demolition teams and riflemen attack his bunker. The fight lasts 6 hours. All 11 defenders die. 3 Marines are wounded. The position delays the advance by about 40 minutes. Then other Marine units, already bypassing, keep moving while combat engineers reduce the bunker with explosives. The pattern repeats across Iwo Jima thousands of times. Japanese defenders fight with desperate courage, inflict terrible casualties, and achieve nothing beyond their own deaths and a few hours' delay. The island is declared secure on 26 March. The numbers that remain on after-action reports are stark. 21-0 Japanese dead, about 1-6 prisoners. 26-0 Marine casualties from 70-0 engaged nearly 40%. Within weeks, those divisions are rebuilding for whatever comes next. After the war, as propaganda fades, Japanese veterans have time to think. Historians interview them, interrogations. Files are declassified, themes emerge, respect for Marine fighting quality, bitterness toward Japanese leadership that lied about American capabilities, recognition that once an enemy like this existed, combining a warrior ethos as strong as their own with an industrial base. Japan could never match the war was lost at the start. General Kuribayashi's final radio message from Iwo Jima, sent on 21 March 1945, 5 days before the island falls, is perhaps the clearest summation. I have fought the Marines for 30. On days, he reports, they are the finest soldiers I have encountered. Their training is superior, their equipment is overwhelming, their courage equals ours, and their numbers are endless. Japan cannot defeat such an enemy. We can only die fighting them and hope that our sacrifice buys time for peace negotiations that preserve something of our nation. The atomic bombs, months later, will make that hope obsolete, but his professional assessment of Marines stands. Over the course of the Pacific War, Marines fight in every major campaign from Guadalcanal in 1940 to Okinawa. In 1945, they suffer about 86-0 casualties, including roughly 19,500 killed. They never fail to take an objective. They never abandon ground once taken. They never give Japanese forces any proof on any island that Marines can be stopped by superior tactics or greater willingness to die. The price is brutal. The results in operational terms are absolute. Japanese analysts studying Marines operations after the war reach a rare unanimous conclusion. The Marines represent the ultimate expression of American military power. They fuse a warrior ethos that mirrors Bushido with industrial resources that only the United States can muster. They train soldiers willing to die for victory and then give those soldiers tanks, ships, aircraft, artillery, logistics, and medicine sufficient. Make that willingness matter. That combination is, in the eyes of men who fought them, unbeatable. Decades later, in 1975, an old Corporal Hideo Takahashi sums up what his generation learned. We were taught that spirit conquers material, he says, that our will to die made us invincible. The Marines taught us that spirit plus material conquers spirit alone. They were as willing to die as we were. But they had Sherman tanks and naval gunfire and unlimited ammunition and air supremacy and medical care and food and all the resources of America behind them. We had our rifles and our courage and promises of victory. That was not enough. It was never going to be enough. The Marines proved that on every island they took. From the Japanese side, the statistics tell part of the story. The battles tell more, but the diaries and interrogation reports, words of men like Yamamoto, Matsumoto, Takahashi, Yoshida, and Kuribayashi give you the complete picture. They fought an enemy who would not stop, who would not surrender, who would die before accepting defeat. And who had the weapons, logistics, and replacements to turn that spirit into a grinding, irrefutable reality? Against such an enemy, courage was not enough, training was not enough, determination was not enough. Nothing was enough except surrender or death. The Imperial Japanese Army chose death. The Marines delivered it with systematic efficiency. That is why, in bunkers from Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima, Japanese soldiers feared fighting Marines more than any other unit. When Marines said they would take an objective, they took it. When they said they would accept any cost, they paid it. They never stopped. And Japanese defenders discovered, one bunker, one ridge, one bloody beach at a time, that courage alone means little when your enemy matches your spirit and multiplies it with firepower. If hearing this story from the Japanese side changed how you think about the Pacific War, consider this. Was it the Marines' training and ethos or the industrial machine behind them had ultimately decided these battles? Could Bush ever have won against an enemy who had both spirit and the ability to replace every loss? Tell me in the comments which island campaign you want to explore next from the perspective of those on the receiving end. Like this video if you think these Japanese voices, written in diaries and interrogation rooms, deserve to be heard alongside the American ones. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want more deep dives into how real peoplian, all sites experienced battles that are too often reduced to maps and slogans.